Yeah. All right, cool. I'll have to remember that.
Awesome.
But
Well, yeah, Keith. So again, thank you so much. And I'm really happy to be on here because it sounds like we have a lot of like resonance together and the things. I mean, I know on your profile, you speak to being a veteran and a life coach. And I am so here for that. I'm out in Texas, but I'm originally from New Hampshire.
yeah.
So it's very interesting. I grew up in the life coaching world, but then I ended up coming out here to Texas and I've been a lot more involved in the veteran sphere because of that. So that's been a really interesting of like my worlds and things crossing.
Yeah, that is so cool, dude. That is so cool. I love that. Like how when you got out there, how did you like see that transition happening like into like work like being with veterans and stuff like that?
Man, it was like I ended up moving out here because of the pandemic. In 2020, I lost my job, I lost my housing, kind of like everything.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to live down in North Carolina for about 6 to 8 months with a friend. And that just didn't really work out the way I was expecting it to. And I had some friends here in Austin and they're like, come on through. And I had never been here. I put all my stuff in a U-Haul. And at the time, it was just me and this little one.
Nice.
And yeah, we drove out here and I just found a like housing on Facebook and found a room and came out here. And the friends who had invited me are also coaches and in the healing space. And they work with they're both trauma trained. So they work in something called Somatic Experiencing International, which is like a specific schooling, which a lot of people talk about somatics, but I'm like, what are you talking about? There's a whole thing with that. But I bring this up because it was kind of like this long thread of how I ended up getting more involved because the work that they were doing and introduced me to was starting to help resolve my own trauma and my own CPTSD in a way that talking to therapists or even being on pharmaceuticals just truly actually did not help and at times made things worse for me.
Yep.
And also, the thing is, when it comes to the world of somatic experiencing, you can kind of start to heal these things without having to directly talk about the event, which I found really interesting.
Yep.
Um, because something that I've learned in my journeys is that actually reiterating the story, especially if it's not in a specific container, can actually re-traumatize you. So I was like, cool. And so I came out here and I ended up getting, I'm trauma informed. So I did a 35-hour training to become specifically trauma informed, not trauma trained. And from there, my partner, Kai, and I wanted to start a company around a holistic health company where we were really focusing back then a little bit more on like physical health and wellness. So saunas, ice baths, compression, and we were working with a lot of jujitsu and mixed martial arts athletes, so MMA.
Yep.
And a lot of those people who gravitate to that space are veterans and we're in Texas. So it was kind of like this wild tapestry that kind of all got woven together. And I developed a technique for getting in the water and ice that was a lot more supportive because I had a lot of veterans who were really called to getting into cold, into ice baths. And I have a lot of, I could say a lot more on that. And I was like, wow, so it seems like these people who have gone through a lot, it seems like they're carrying a lot and they're looking for more peak experiences, let's say, like that intensity,
Yeah.
because it can provide some relief. But I was noticing from my training that their bodies were saying one thing while their voices were saying another thing. And I was watching this dissonance and I was like, okay, so how do we make a different technique? How do I like offer up some more empowerment, some more autonomy? And I'm like, because it seems like these people are mind over mattering and it's resulting in not the effect they want. They're getting burnout or they're actually noticing. I was noticing that a high amount of the veteran population were actually not able to be in cold water for very long. And so I developed a protocol for getting them in the water that was actually supportive to help basically integrate their experience. And so we started doing that. We even had this one gentleman who served, and he had a really bad back injury and couldn't be in the water for more than 10 seconds. We gave him our protocol. We sponsored him with an ice bath for a bit. He's up over 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes now. His back pain is almost gone, like at times, because he still has some chronic health things going on. But then, so we kind of dove head first. That's like my very long story, because it's like all these little moments that kind of led up to that. And so we started working with a lot of veterans in that way, because a lot of veterans' nervous systems have gone through so much and they're carrying so much, and it shows up in their stress levels, in their experiences and mental health. And I really care about that.
Well, um, something really weird is happening
Mm,
right now. You are um you're a whole in all the research that I've been doing,
mm,
and you are speaking to the observation of the science that I've been studying for 10 years without having that last puzzle piece. And I am high off my mind, right, out of my mind right now, so, like, and my emotions, like, kinda get to the surface, but I don't know what is happening right now, but, like, I feel like, man, like, the universe is just dropping this
mm.
piece,
Keith, would
right
you
now.
be open to doing something with me right now?
100%, yeah.
Um, so I'm going to offer you, it's just going to be a sequence of noticing, and that's it. This is all invitational. You don't have to do any of it at any time. You can choose to say no. So I'm going to invite you to just notice your body in the room, feeling your sit bones pressing into the couch that you're sitting on, noticing the back, noticing the couch supporting your back from your lower back up to your shoulders. Maybe noticing where your feet are. Are they flat on the floor? Are they up on your heel? And just notice if you can feel the steadiness of your feet pressing into the floor beneath you. Notice your body pressing down into the seat below you, and that seat almost pressing back up into you with full support. And without changing it, see if you can notice your breath. Is it small and light? Is it deep and long? Just with some curiosity, noticing if it's living up in your chest or down in your belly. And coming back to your sit bones. And if it feels available, taking a slow breath in through your nose and a really long exhale out through your mouth, almost like a straw. Doing that one more time. Long exhale. Oh, maybe even softening your jaw by 1%. And if it helps, if that feels intense, you can look out around your room and just notice the space. How far away are the walls, the ceiling? Can you notice something blue?
You know, my walls are blue.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now I'd like you, if you can, take a moment and see if there's something that's different, if something shifted in your body or not. And then the last thing I'd just like to say is I am not uncomfortable with your emotions. I don't want to save you from them, and I don't want to make you not feel them, and they're welcome here. And I think that I work with a lot of men actually, and I want to be the person saying that like your feelings and emotions are important. They're really important. And I think I see strength in you having them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Keith.
That was cool because like I feel very grounded again, because as you were talking and explaining, and I started to see how it's I don't know, just when you see how things work out and you can see like a miracle in the moment, it's such a beautiful thing. And it also can just be an incredibly like overwhelming, sensation, and I feel completely just grounded again. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Um, I'm just amazed with everything that you said. So but when I started going to the VA and realizing that I was dealing with PTSD for like 20 years without knowing it. Um, I started with like different therapies. One of them that they used that they said was the greatest therapy that they had was this thing called prolonged exposure. So you go multiple times a week for about 3 hours a session, and you just relive the most horrific moments of your life, over and over again, with the goal to desensitize you to it so that you can keep all those memories in your mind constantly without reacting to them or without feeling a certain way. But it was funny because when I was learning about this stuff, realizing that we can think of a memory and have a strong emotional response to that, and our brain can't distinguish the between a memory and the actual event happening. So like you said, we're literally re-traumatizing ourselves. And going through therapy for so long, all these medications, and I just kept getting worse and worse. So I decided, if they don't have my answers, I'm going to find my own answers. And I was going back to college at the time, and I was studying anthropology, and I came in one day, and there was this little drawing on the board, and it was a drawing of a rite of passage model, right? And there's three phases to it. So there's a separation, a transition, and then a reincorporation, right? So you separate from all cultural norms. You transition where you're not yet what you're going to be, but you're no longer what you were, right? And then you reincorporate usually into in a higher level of responsibility, but into the same culture. So like if you think about like some of the tribes like in South America and Africa, they go through these things. Like there's one, I think in South America, they for women, they bring a girl out into the forest and they tie her up in like these gigantic banana leaves, and they put her underneath this tree. And while she's under there, the women are teaching her like her responsibility as a woman in the village, and they're taking care of her and all that. And then when she's untied like a week later, now she comes back to the village, but she's now a woman, no longer a child in the village, right? So I saw that that was what happens when you join the military. You separate from all cultural norms. You sorry. Um there's the transition through a basic training where you're not yet a soldier, but you're no longer civilian. And then the difference though is you don't reincorporate. You don't go back to your cultural baseline. You're now in a new culture. And a lot of the research that's out there, they say this is what happens. It's a cultural shift, not just a job, that you're taking. Because basic training, you learn the basics of fighting and stuff, but you learn how to talk to superiors, how to salute certain ones, how to stand when you're with an officer versus a non-commissioned officer. You learn the entire code, even how to write the date, tell the time. And when you leave, they just plop you back into the civilian world. So you have this military cultural mindset but you're in the civilian world. So when you started talking about how their bodies and their words, because veterans are stuck in this transitional period, right? They call it a period of liminality where you're betwixt and between. So they're no longer in the military, but their identity, their self, is not a civilian. So they're stuck in these two worlds. And I've always been saying, like, for years, like, we recognize our surroundings, but we feel lost. We feel something's off, but we don't know what it is because I see everything. And so in your work, what you've been doing is what you saw. You saw like the shadow of that, like, being stuck, in that liminality, almost like a sci-fi thing where you're stuck between two worlds, two dimensions, and you're seeing the shadow of it, like, through their actions. Like, that, dude, that is blowing my fucking mind.
Yeah. Well, because that's okay. So, um, uh, so I've, like I said, I kind of like grew up with a coaching family. So like I grew up with a dad who was really into Tony Robbins. And
Nice.
so, yeah. So like I have been in a lot of spaces around, um, talking about psychology, coaching, all these things. So it's something that I'm very familiar with, but only in the last like 3-ish years, I was introduced to this one, group of people that are just phenomenal. It's called the Condor approach. And one of their things that they talk about is integration isn't optional.
Mm,
And that has become like also one of my missing like linchpins, because first it was me under feeling like seeing the nervous system, and oh, I could go off on that. That's like my favorite. I love the nervous system, everything about it, talking about it. So I basically started saying that I'm a nervous system integration coach, because
nice.
integration is everything, right? It's because what I'm hearing, from what you've so like astutely noticed, this like macro pattern, is that we're starting something and we're not finishing it.
Yeah.
So we are going to the grocery store with our list, we're buying the food, and we're coming back home with it, and we're not integrating it consciously, right? Because you bring your groceries home, they're going to get integrated into your house no matter what you do. It's either going to get integrated by going into the fridge, by getting cooked, or it's going to rot on the counter. It's not optional. It will integrate, but how it integrates, that's where we have our power, our choice.
That's
And so what
beautiful.
I'm hearing is that there are a lot of veterans who are being led back here, who come back and they're being left to rot on the counter. And I just think that's unacceptable, um, because it takes time and support. And sometimes it can go really fast. It can go faster than we think it will for that integration. But if they're not supported, I also don't even like saying the words good or bad, because I think that that binary is just not, I don't think it works, because I think we start getting into the shame space, which just creates more issues. So I like to say helpful or unhelpful, because I'm like, if I'm hungry, eating is good, right? But eating is not bad. It just becomes unhelpful to keep eating once I'm full.
Right.
So I love that shift too, because then that helps with the idea of like context, because to me, context is everything. But I really love about what you said is it's like we have this almost like loss of ritual and culture in our own culture, because people are going through this really big experience of, like you said, being introduced to a whole new way of being, relating, communicating, and then they come back and it's just completely shockingly different. And my teachers have taught me that, and I really love this definition, that the definition of trauma is something that was too much, too soon, too fast, or not enough. And the body, nervous system, mind couldn't cope with it. And so it went into some sort of overwhelm. And then that couldn't be integrated into the experience. Because as you probably know, two people can go to war, go through the same combat experience, and one might come back with PTSD and one might not. Because it's all about the integration of the experience.
Yep.
Like, right, some of that's how they came into it, like what they were set up for in their body, their mind, But then a lot of times the studies are saying that it has to do with how they were met, received, and integrated on the end of it is going to determine that. And I think what's happening is that people are coming back and they're not being, there's no integration happening. At least that's from my perspective, from the people I'm seeing, from the patterns I'm witnessing. And I'm like, yeah. And you know, you spoke to that idea of exposure therapy, and I'm not a therapist, and I'm not trained in that. I'm curious of how that has worked in the past or who it's been helpful with. And I also know that I've heard a lot of people talk about how that hasn't always been helpful. And I think
Right.
that's where it talks about context being important, because what works for me might not work for you. And I think that the more that we get in tune and aligned with ourselves, we're going to be able to more quickly discern that that one's really not working for me.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
I think that's a key part of the whole like integration process and like healing process of this is finding what works for you. And since we're all different, there's going to be different combination of things that are going to work. And then also like what might work for a while might then lose its effect, and then it's time to find something new.
Yeah.
So, we think of healing in this very linear process. Even with having my rotator cuff done last week, like I was doing amazing, and I was like, dude, this is going to be one of the easiest surgeries I had. I was uncomfortable, didn't even have to take medicine. Like, just Tylenol was like getting me through. And then I sat in a certain way with my arm unsupported the other, was it Tuesday? And I've known I have never felt pain before in my life. Like this was like this overwhelming, where I was barely in control of my body. I couldn't walk. I could barely breathe. Like it was horrible. Um so I had to go to the hospital. They had to they had to juice me up hard like with stuff like to get it back under control. So but I was confused because I was like, I've been doing so good. Why is this happening, 4 days after the surgery? And I just had my 1 week post-op, and they're like, you're gonna have more flare-ups, like, hopefully not that bad, because if
Mm.
you then there's something might be wrong, but you're gonna have another flare-up, like, that comes, so we think of healing in this linear process, but I've noticed that I'll do all this work and I'll have this growth, and then I'll, like, plateau out for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, "What the hell's wrong with me? Why am I going through this again?" But it's this never-ending thing that you just keep building on. And different things are gonna work at different times.
And that's so real. And actually, I love this because I love having conversations with people. And I'm like, because I kind of love to like gather little data points and be like, ooh, does this work with my current set of beliefs and theories or not? And honestly, that really aligns for me, because when we look at the way that the nervous system works, it actually is always going in a wave.
Yep.
Because I don't want to get like too sciency, because I don't know how, like, I don't know exactly the language of who I'm, the audience who views this, because I can go, like, I can nerd out on it.
Oh,
But
yeah,
so
dude.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm working right now on getting better at speaking in more palatable languaging. But basically, so the nervous system has two branches: sympathetic and parasympathetic. And your sympathetic is the one that is for waking up, maybe going like running, like it activates you. So it's helpful activation. It's, you wake up in the morning, your heart rate starts going up because you wake up, and then maybe you drive, you get to work, and then you sit down at your chair, and so your body starts to kind of rest, go a little bit more parasympathetic. And then you have to get up and go to a meeting, and maybe you're like, oh man, I gotta talk with my boss. And so you notice you're getting a little bit more energy in your body, and then you might go back down to rest and digest for your parasympathetic lunch. And then, right, so this is actually super normal. Even like you wake up, you go to sleep. So it's supposed to be a normal up and down. But what happens when a nervous system gets dysregulated is it can go ping, pong, ping, and
Right.
it's like very jagged, or we can go up and get stuck and then collapse back down and get stuck. And then it still will keep going. But I think that there's also this thing about humans are actually incredibly cyclical beings, but we've been taught from young ages culturally that things are, like you said, linear.
Yeah.
And they're not, right? It's we have 24-hour circles, we have a month, we have a year, we have seasons, we have energy cycles. We Male bodies are on a circadian hormonal cycle.
Yep.
Female bodies are on an infradian, right? So it's like sometimes it's like I feel lied to at
Oh
times
yeah.
because I'm like, wow, like I thought that I was just moving forward, not that I was going on like, right? Everything actually has these normal ups and downs, these things that are, I'm, oh my goodness, I might have to learn the same lesson 12 times before evidently I'm finished with it.
Yep.
Like, oh, the humanness of being human sometimes is a lot.
Dude, oh my God. Yeah, I was just talking to a buddy of mine, Evan Britton, and he was talking about how sometimes when we get into like growth, spirituality and stuff, we forget that we're human beings being spiritual, you know? So we try to put on like almost doing it through a lens of spirituality. And I think it's so easy to fall into playing a character in that moment. You know, like I gotta like, I'm in mourning right now because I had to shave my beard off because I can't use my right arm and stuff, but, you know, when it finally comes back and I'm whole again, you know, I gotta, like, braid it or, you know, whatever, like, put shells in it, you know, all this stuff to play a character instead of, you know, act who I am instead of be who I am, you know,
Mm,
and remember that it's all through a lens of being human. So whoever I am, if that's who I am, great. Like have as many beads as you can possibly fit, but if it's just be who you are, you know?
yeah, I love that. There's actually one of my mentors has us do this exercise sometimes where they're like, okay, sets a timer for like 5 minutes. And they're like, on a piece of paper, I want you to write down all of your identities, everything about who you are. You know, like, so for me, I was like, I am a coach, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I am a dog mom, I am. And I went through and I just started listing all of these identities. And then they they offered that up and I was like, okay, now then they went into some other things talking around it, but I took that and kind of went deeper with it, where I was like, okay, so how many of these identities, like what do I feel about them? Are there some that I have a difficult relationship with? Are there some of these identities that I'm playing out like as like an actor, like you said, like this is a costume that I put on because someone else told me that that was my role? Or like, and so it's been really interesting kind of like deconstructing my own identity and self in that way of like, is this still serving me? And I mean, you just brought up something really beautiful of like these, like sometimes I think that there's these little small little micro moments that we don't always think, like we don't always see them for how beautiful they are, but like, you know, you said you're in mourning for this for shaving that. And I think that honestly a lot of, and this is not something I talk about a lot because people can get a little squeamish with just these words, but I actually really believe in grief work, like in shame work, and this like really potent thing because I think that grief work is actually life work. I
Yeah.
think that most of us are have not been taught how to grieve, have not been taught to feel, to have tolerance for being uncomfortable, for feeling emotions. And I think that we actually have a huge loss of culture and ritual. And I think that again, even people have certain emotions tied up in the word ritual, but like, you know, we can do speeds, what's your coffee ritual, right? That's something about giving yourself energy, right?
Yeah.
Taking in caffeine, but also this idea of like most of us just take our grief, we say it one time to somebody and we put it in a little box, but that box gets put on our back.
Yep.
And that's one of my favorite authors is Francis Weller. He talks about his book that was probably one of the most impactful books that I've read probably in the last 10 years, and it's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow.
Hmm.
And he's also an anthropologist, and he works with men and like does a lot of like coaching and grief work. And um, he really speaks to this thing of like we have this loss of processing, this loss of a lot of things. And I have another one of my friends is actually a death doula. And she's like, I'm not helping people with their actual end of life process right now. She's like, but I'm helping people move through these little tiny deaths, right? There was a loss, there was a death of the beard. And how do we meet it, feel it, grieve it, and go to the other side of it so that that identity or that grief is not trailing behind us?
Yes. And dude, our brains like want homeostasis so bad, but life is is constant change, constant loss. I mean, every second that I breathe is a second that I will not breathe in the future. So everything is about slowly losing, and succumbing to the entropy of that's a law of the universe.
Yeah.
And each time that those changes happen, the reason why I like even say like I'm mourning the loss of my beard because I don't recognize myself, you know.
That makes sense.
And it's funny too, because like I look in the mirror and I'm like, what the hell happened to me? Because I have pictures like where I didn't have like the double chin and stuff, and like my skin was like smoother and everything. And then I hide behind this beard for so long and then look, and then I'm like, what who is this person? So all these little changes are times that we stop recognizing who we are, and going back to like living like linearly, we should always see who we are. You know what I mean? Because it should be just like a movie that, where it's just millions of pictures in a row. We can take each one and we can see the progression, but we don't see the progression in our lives like that, and it comes up and it's shocking to the system.
Oh, that's so real. That's like there was something too that I've been speaking to a little bit in some of my with like coaching clients and just kind of with my partner too, is this idea of like so I'm in my early 30s, and there's some I've been having a lot of grief coming up recently around futures that I thought I was gonna live, or like the person like I get to grieve parts of me that I thought I was going to be, or paths or people I thought I was going to go be, and I'm not, that I'm someone different. Cuz like even when I was younger, like I had a certain dream for myself to go do these certain things, or I had all these plans. But then I realized that either some of those plans were made from places that weren't actually the authentic me. It doesn't mean I didn't want them, doesn't mean I
Yeah.
still don't want them at times, but like so it's sometimes not even for me just grieving stuff that actually happened, but like future projections of wishes and dreams that are never going to happen. And I'm like, ugh, that's hard, because it's even the optimism in me is like I could do so much, and I could go start this company, and I have this amazing idea for this product. And then I like slow down and I sit with myself and I'm like, yeah, but Kelly, like if I actually want to prioritize my health and my healing, that doesn't actually make sense. And then I get to grieve that thing. And I'm like, oh, that's a bit of a gut punch. But it also and that's another thing. I love this thing again. One of my mentors, Cole Whitty, says, like, what are you creating? What are you creating or not creating when you do this? So if I
Mm.
choose to slow down and make time to sauna every day, let's say I do 30 minutes of sauna every day. Well, that 30 minutes, I'm creating something for myself, right? I'm creating health, I'm creating detox, I'm literally helping my body live longer, all of these things. But I'm also not doing something else because I chose that time. Now I could be not doing something in my business in a certain way, or I could not be helping that friend that is perpetually asking for my help, right? So it's like this idea of like, okay, if I come back to this neutrality of like, okay, putting on my own oxygen mask first, it's okay that there's going to be things I'm not going to be able to do. We're not supposed to do everything.
Yeah.
But it's this like that idea of like there is a cost to everything. And I mean that in a more neutral way than I think we've taken it. It's a beautiful cost sometimes. Sometimes the cost is that I'm going to be happy, is that I'm going to have health and wellness and I'm going to meet myself. And sometimes the cost is that not everybody gets to come with me as I grow. And that comes with a whole bunch of grief.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Dude, one of the most important lessons I learned on psilocybin was I was just chilling out, and I was smoking a little cannabis, and because I was mesmerized by the smoke, you know? But, like, every second, the smoke would change, and I would get so upset that the beautiful pattern I was looking at was gone. And then another second would go by and the smoke would change and just upset again. And that longing for the moment to never end. So I think that the where culture has become, it has brought us into, like you said, like being lied to. We've been taught that all these expectations and these dreams that we have for ourselves, to hold on to them as if they're the only thing. And then, like you said, we end up mourning those things instead of, and to look at one side of that, like you, because like you said, dude, I mean, mourning, it's a beautiful thing to stay with the memory of that, because when we dream about stuff, like when I dream, like, oh man, I could be an astronomer, and looking out in these telescopes at these stars, and almost like touching, the most distant points of the universe. I could do that, but like, all right, I'm 50. I'm not going to be starting that journey now. You know what I mean? Like, and like applying for jobs like when I'm 80, you know. So, but the dream is beautiful. The dream is amazing.
Yeah.
And I found so much joy and comfort and love in that dream, so I can mourn the loss of that expectation I might have wanted in my life, but I can still hold on to the beauty of that dream and keep that alive.
Yeah, and I love how you're talking about expectations because that's usually one of the foundational things when I have a new client that I talk about is that the idea of an expectation or an agreement. And they're two very different things. And I think that that would be really helpful for so many people to just get more clarity around because an expectation is something, it's like an assumption. And it's usually not communicated. And an agreement is, hey, let's meet for lunch at this restaurant at this time. Yep. Are we in mutuality? Amazing. Now, an expectation is, you know what, like I just thought my mom and I would be meeting for lunch, right? And then I can get all sorts of ways about that, right? And so the more that we can get in agreement with ourselves, we actually step into empowerment, right? We step into these places of like, autonomy and those great because expectation tends to be very murky and there's definitely a time and a place for expectation. It's because it's there, it's probably useful. That's another beautiful like vantage point or lens that the nervous system education has given me is that pretty I have yet to find something, an emotion, a reaction, a situation of like how someone like a human bees in the world is in the world that doesn't stem from an initially intelligent place.
Yeah.
Now it can grow into kind of like a wild or maybe like unhelpful thing and I can start choking out the helpful stuff, but it comes from a place of intelligence. And like I love what you're saying about too about the idea of like yeah, we had an expectation of this dream, right? But we didn't make an agreement with ourselves about, okay, I'm going to go to school, I'm
Yeah.
going to do this thing, but I also love what you said about kind of like also keeping it alive because I think sometimes in the past for me, Well, and I'll speak to my own experience, but my black and white thinking generally is a trauma response
Yes.
because the nervous system speaks in two languages only: safeties and threats, and that's it. And then it's your prefrontal cortex that's going to be interpreting the data. Again, like you said, your brain, your nervous system can't tell the difference between a perceived threat and an actual threat. That's why we jump at scary movies.
Yep.
So when anyone jumps because of a scare, it's like, hey, your nervous system's working great because you probably are the reason why we've survived to the point of human evolution right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but that's also the thing where it's like, how do we live in the gray a little bit more? Because the gray is curiosity, right? It's how, what part of my dream could I keep alive? Like, how, what, okay, so maybe I'm not going to go be an astronomer at NASA, but how do I like nurture and love and nourish that part of me? Like, how could I actualize this dream in a different way? Like, for
Yes.
me, like, like, again, I had so many dreams and hopes, and I'm like, well, shoot, they're really not going to come out that way. But like, I don't want to have my intelligent negativity bias stop me from then having anything good in life.
Yep.
I can still have so much joy from a different version of that dream. And what if that version is actually even better than I could have imagined? And that's been really hard for me because being able to hold goodness has actually been harder for me than dealing with bad things.
Mm.
I have reps in trauma. In fact, you have shit going down, I'm actually probably going to be calm, cool, and collected. And I'm going to be like, hey, this is actually, fortunately, my system is so used to trauma and chaos and crap that she feels at home there.
Yep.
But I don't want to live in trauma. I don't want to live in conflict and all of these things that aren't working. Like, I have my work here on this planet is actually to grow my capacity to feel joy and connection and stability and the good things.
Yep. Yep. Dude, it's so crazy because like once you start down that path, you take that first step. I think it's almost like inevitable. We all end up at like the same point, like becoming obsessed with how far we can go with this, you know? So yeah, when I started coaching, so my professor, because I wasn't going to look into coaching at all. I was like, it's a scam. You know, it's a bunch of hippie people like taking money from people that are hurting and then giving them a cliche like where focus goes energy flows, and then I used to hate that thing because I heard Tony Robbins say that, and then I heard everybody that became like an advice giver say the same thing. And so I was like, I'm not looking at coaching. And my professor's like, you need to look at all healing modalities. She said, especially the ones you don't agree with. That way there you can speak to why you don't agree. So I'm like,
Yeah. Oh, I
"Mhm."
love that.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, I'm sitting there, I'm in my senior thesis class, and I'm like, I'm gonna rip coaching just a new ass, man. Like this is gonna be so fun. And I pick up a Tony Robbins book to start just learning how deep the garbage goes. And I remember I was my wife was driving out and I was in the passenger seat and I started having a panic attack. And I had just got done reading this chapter on visualizations. And he went through this very easy to remember exercise where you visualize whatever you're feeling like. So for me, I visualized the word anxiety. And he said just let your brain paint a picture. So for me, it was a black background with like almost like horror letter type words, like it was all red, the word anxiety and drippy.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I put it on the opposite side of the Grand Canyon and I made it huge. So it was like I was like standing right next to it, but even though like the Grand Canyon was in between us in my mind, and it was sharp and vibrant and colorful and bright. And then I just started changing how I saw it. I started to let it shrink. I started to let it go blurry. The words started kind of blending together and it just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And then in my head, I allowed myself to hear this pop when it snapped out of existence. And my panic attack was gone. It took like 30 seconds. And I remember I was sitting in the car and I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, I've never experienced anything like that with, at this point, I think 5 years of therapy, numerous medications, including stuff I had to get my liver function tested every month, because it would Depakote because it can shut off your liver function. And when I told the psychiatrist who put me on that, I don't want to take something that toxic, she was like, "See, that's paranoia. That means you're bipolar." And I'm like, "Wow, dude, you went to school to learn how to gaslight me. That is amazing." Um, yeah. Um, and it was like gone. So then I started looking more into it. And I was like, "Dude, there's actually some science behind this. Dude, your dog is freaking I love
She's
that
my
thing, man."
favorite little monkey. Come up here. Come here. So
Oh
this
my
is Pete.
gosh.
She is like, can you look over here? Can you look at the
Hey,
camera? Oh. So she is Siberian
beautiful.
Husky, and then her dad is a full purebred Siberian Husky, and her mom was some sort of backyard, but I think she has Malinois and Mastiff and from
Oh,
her
yeah,
mom.
yeah.
But she's her genetics, I think she got more of the husky. She is the most sweetest, loving, little playful, good girl on the whole planet. She is the light of my life. She has
Yeah.
brought in the most amount of joy for me. And she's been really cute this whole time. She keeps like bringing me things. She's like, "Do you want this?" And I'm like, no, thank you. That's for you." She
Oh,
just
what a good
all my
girl.
come here, come say hi again. Up. That wasn't the right command, but you listened. We've done a ton of training with her too. Um, she's my perfect. Also, I will say that she actually has helped because like I do want to be a mother someday. Like we'll see like maybe a little bit like some years from now.
Yeah.
But like I've had a lot of panic around that idea about like having a child and like what if I fuck them up and I have all of my issues and it's like that whole fear of passing down because also too the more that I've learned I'm like, oh no, like I know so much about the nervous system. And actually, in maybe a week or two, I'm actually going to have another certification of, I'm going to be a somatic attachment practitioner. So basically, I've
Oh,
gone through a bunch of schooling about learning about early developmental of attachment theory, boundary theory, and then the physical somatics, like and how all of that actually is one thing. And I'm learning about like certain developmental stages will change are important for how the person is for the rest of their life. And I'm like, how am I gonna have a kid? And so right. So even with all this info, it's like sometimes I terrorize myself with it. But she has almost helped heal some of that fear because like I can witness her from a dog standpoint of she has a secure attachment base. People always talk about like you have a disorganized, you're insecure, you're an anxious attachment base, yada yada. I'm like, yeah, but look, and I know she's a dog, so obviously it's a little different than the human. And I help make a little I help raise a baby that fell a little fur baby that at least I provided enough safety and connection and security for her that I developed a mammal that had a secure experience. And that has been really healing for me to be like, what if I can do it?
dude, I'll tell you what. So, my oldest daughter is 28, my youngest is 27, and then we got a dog 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at 11 months, we found out that the vet said that she has the worst case of hip dysplasia that he's ever seen.
Wow.
And he gave us 3 years with her max, and she just turned 7. But we've destroyed our house. Like, we had hardwood floors, we had yoga mats down for like the longest time so she wouldn't slip.
Yeah.
We had to make a lot of concessions. Like, we couldn't bring her to like doggy daycare anymore and stuff. But um like, she gets so much love, so much attention, and there's different ways to stimulate, the dog, like, where we play hide and seek every night. We'll hide some treats around the house, and then she'll spend 20 minutes sniffing them out, and then she just passes out. She's done, but in a way, because my kids always make fun of us because 'cause they're like, "Dude, if we got the same care that you give to Zoe, like, maybe we wouldn't have the issues we have," we have such an amazing relationship with our girls. But they like the dog has more toys, and I'm like, it's easier with kids because after a certain age, there's some communication that starts. But with a dog, you have to learn how to read the look, just like the eyes, or the body language. So I would say it's a little bit harder. The stakes aren't as high, you know what I mean? But I think it's a little bit harder sometimes, like to raise another species instead of our own, man.
Well, I love hearing that. Please tell me more because
Yeah.
that's yeah, it's very interesting for me in that sense because I've heard people say that we're like, yeah, you're like, well, a dog, they're basically stuck as a nonverbal 6-year old for their whole life. You're like, at
Yeah.
least kids will grow up and become somewhat self sufficient. And yeah, it is. It's, I mean, and obviously too, like, don't want to get the haters out there that are like, kids are so different than dogs. I'm like, no, we get it. And right. But it's like also too, it's like all of these experiences that I see are just, they're just more little moments of like showing us that they're just like teaching moments that we can reflect back and have like almost like let them have a dialogue. And I think also, and there's another thing that I really learned too from that has been encouraging and frightening that I've learned about like childhood development too is it's like so kids learn how to be and treat themselves not based on what parents say but how you treat yourself. So the majority of kids development is the majority of it's nonverbal. So like I learned how to love myself by watching how my mom loved herself.
Mm,
And that has been hard to have that realization because then I see how hard my mom is struggling. Because if I'm struggling, whew, and I've done a lot of healing. And so then it's like not turning it as like a you should have done better, like towards my parents, but like they literally could not have done any better than they did based on the circumstances and access to information that they had.
yeah.
And I think sometimes for me, it's my whole life, I have had this ability to like see things for what they are. So I was like literally like a little 10-year-old. And I was like, wow, that person is screaming at me. And I'm like, I think it's because they had a bad day at work and they're not feeling their feelings. So I've been like way too aware of myself for way too long. And then I've also used that, right? We can really weaponize anything we want against
Oh
ourselves
my God, yeah.
because like I took that to like almost internalize it, be like, well, I almost like made excuses for some people, but at the same time, as much as there were excuses, it was also understanding. So it's like, right, it's there's always like a two sides to the thing. And but I also get the context of people really well. And I'm like, yeah, like right. And it is sweet that I love that you can joke with your girls of like, yeah, well, sorry, like, but also like we did the best we could, and that's great because there's there's this thing that's been driving me crazy that I've seen on Instagram for the last few years, where it's like so they have these jars of water, and they're like they probably filled them with like Coca-Cola, so it's like this dark color. Then they take one and they put it under the faucet and they start pouring in fresh water, and they're like, "This is you healing all of your generational trauma." And they wait until the cup goes completely clear and I'm like, that is creating an unrealistic expectation for people right now. Just because this is like literally the first few generations of understanding trauma, how to heal it, and all this stuff, we're not supposed to heal all of it at once. You literally can't. Because also, epigenetically, we're still dealing with some of the things, and you know, we can talk about if you want to call trauma like a back injury, because it is. Technically, a paper cut is trauma to the skin. So
Yeah.
we also get really precious about that word. But we're healing things from 7 generations, up to 7 generations ago.
Yep.
So that means you literally cannot heal all of that. And I'm not meant to heal all of it. I'm not meant to heal exactly the next being that is in my lineage. I'm meant to do the part I'm meant to do. And then the next person is meant to do their part. And I think that that is like a hill I'm planting my flag on.
Dude, 100 fucking percent. Because see, even when we try to be open-minded, we're always confronted with how narrow-minded we really are. Like one of my things is like I'm gonna put this like go doing the class with Jarrett, like on your profile, like say something cool. It's a little bit weird. So I'm gonna change mine to like I think I have it like chasing the rabbit because like when I smoke, I'll have a thought, and then 20 minutes later, I'm like, this is the greatest conversation I've ever had with myself, you know. But it's gonna be chasing the rabbit until I find the paradox, you know. And I want to live my life like dancing on this like tightrope in between these dimensional realities that like what a paradox is, man. And that's like one of them. Like we see, all right, communication should happen this fast because that's the way we do it. And we're the pinnacle of all energy in existence, you know. But a tree, a bug that a tree has never interacted with can land on its leaf and take a bite. The tree will analyze the saliva of that bug and then create a pheromone that'll either attract its natural predator or be like a repellent to that bug. So trees are master chemists. It thinks it,
So cool.
right? But it happens at such a slow rate, we don't recognize the even intellect is like not, I don't know the word to put the intelligence that's behind it. You know, the same thing with mushrooms, like the mycelium network. You know, you cut down a tree and all of the grass and the shrubs and the other trees in the area feed that stump through the mycelium network. And that's why, like, you'll have a tree that falls and rots, but the stump that still has the roots that's connected to the network can live on for centuries, you
Mm.
know? Until it starts to like break down because all of nature around it recognizes the wound and feeds it, you know, but it happens at such a slow rate we don't think about that as communication, you know. And that's all it is. It's just communication at a different rate,
Yep.
you
And what
know.
happens when that communication is severed, right?
Yes.
So then we start to see, honestly, I'm brain blanking on where this concept came from, but they talk about ease and dis-ease, so disease, right? And that's I like to when I'm communicating. I love what you said about the tightrope because Kai and I talk about we have one foot in the science and one foot in the woo, and then we can kind of
That's
like
huge.
go
Yes.
between the two because I actually personally believe that spirituality and woo is just science we don't have the words for yet.
Yep.
Because please, people used to think bacteria was black magic. And I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
yeah, we just
yeah.
didn't have telescopes. And sometimes I'm happy to call something magic. What if I don't? What if everything could work out perfectly for me and I didn't actually have to know why? So some of that too is another thing that I'm working on. But that's kind of going back to what you said about the whole like the slower communication. Well, I like to say that the body is like earth and the mind is like wind.
Mm,
And sometimes then there ends up being this disconnection of pace. And I also have this belief that we can start to see, right? Because if the more we zoom out and get a really big bird's eye view on the human collective, ever the reason why the human species, if I was, because again, I was also very interested in anthropology when I was younger. I never got like a degree in it, but I took some classes in college because I've always felt like an anthropologist. Like I'm not, I've always felt separate from people. And I'm like, have felt like an anthropologist watching another species. And I think some of that has really helped me. And it's also shown me my work is about connecting with people and connecting myself into the network of people. And I'm also a huge, I go on side quests also with work with
dude, I
conferences and
yes.
I'm a huge side quester.
Dude,
Um,
I'm starting to believe like have you ever heard the term like I forget what it like your soul family?
yes.
Because dude, everything you're saying, I'm like, we're like freaking twins, dude. It's the
I mean,
weirdest
please. I
thing.
mean, and also like we're technically from like the same area, even though now we're not, right? We're on in different time zones and everything. But I
Yeah,
feel you there. Um,
dude.
right. And okay, so then there's this idea for me about when we zoom out and we look at the greater collective of the human growth, it's all been about surviving, right?
Yeah,
It's because that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to grow and create something better and get more resources, right? Like what's the point of creating a better future for our kids? We're trying to create more resources so that they have things that we didn't, but then also we get mad at them for having things that we didn't because we didn't process our own grief. So you kids should be more grateful. No, that's, oh, it sounds like you have some unprocessed shame if you're saying should need to, have to,
Yep.
and doing a lot of finger pointing, but I digress. Um, but right, so it's this thing of this, the human collective is running forward to survive. We're running to something. We're running to progress. We're trying to make things quicker and faster and easier. We're using AI to get there quicker. We are outsourcing jobs to different countries because we can get it faster, cheaper, better, whatever. I mean, not always better, but faster, cheaper. And so to me, if I was an anthropologist and I slowed down, I would say, ooh, I'm going to be curious. And I were to reflect that back to nervous systems, and the nervous system of the human collective is that they are running towards something. Well, running towards something is a flight response, which means they're running away from something. And I'm like, wow, so it actually sounds like we're not necessarily creating right now from safety, from curiosity and beautiful things and connection. We're creating from a survival response right now. And how is that supported in the greater collective? We have a lot of fighting, a lot of disconnection. We're all disconnected from our own minds and body on the micro level. On a macro and micro, we're disconnected from nature. We are disconnected from political parties, even though we're running towards connection. We're not actually slowing down to, because slowness is actually safety
Yep.
generally. Because if there is not a tiger chasing me, I can sit and rest. And chronically, I see that we have demonized rest. We even have to call it active rest just to rest
Yeah.
because we can't even be in our own emotions. And everyone's saying the society is too tolerant. I'm like, kids, let's take a seat because no, we are intolerant of our own uncomfortable feelings. And there's that also, this is another one that kills me when people are like, um, kill your comfort zone, get out of your comfort zone, you need to be more uncomfortable. And I'm like, oh, you're adorable, because honestly, you're really comfortable at being uncomfortable in certain ways, but not in the ways that actually are going to help you. So
Yep.
you're really comfortable and going past your thresholds and pushing yourself too far, too much. Also, like, just to say, hey, if you're doing a 20-minute ice bath, you're not really, really good at ice baths. You're really, really good at disassociating, and you're harming your body. So there's like, right. And that's a very general statement and it's a little bit spicy, but literally there is science about certain temperatures and times you're being counterproductive just to show that you're good at being uncomfortable. And I say that because I've been that person, I've done it. So
Yep.
not a ton of shade, a little bit, but
Dude, I'm just like so amazed at like how like the vibe that is just going on. Like my mind just keeps getting blown. I I I was so looking forward to this, but I did not expect this. And the way my mind goes, like I'm already planning like future shit. Like dude, like just from like your whole like that transition from like that being really surrounded in the coaching world to like still being in the coaching world, but like the veterans to everything that you're talking about is all stuff that I've learned over the years, and it's I had to learn it myself, you know.
yep.
One of the things for me, and like we said, like I'm not going to put somebody else down, because everything is going to work for somebody. But when I found like, all right, there's something about coaching. I was looking for somebody to work with, and I couldn't afford $10,000, for 6 sessions. Um, and then like with some of them, the shame that gets put on you, like, oh well, you don't really want to heal. Then if it was really important to you, you'd find a way. You'd go into debt. You would beg somebody in your family for money, whatever.
Keith, I literally could. I have kept my mouth real quiet about like the things that are not that are the sticky parts of coaching because Yeah, you're so correct. Like I actually I did coaching in my early 20s and then literally stopped for probably 5 to 6 years because I couldn't have the word life coach in my mouth
Yes.
because I felt dirty and scammy and everything you were saying about like let me see how I can get the garbage or how deep is the garbage. I'm like, yeah, because honestly, there's a lot of people out there who have latched on to like a couple concepts and they're speaking through their own beliefs. They're not actually being curious, they're pushing their own agenda.
Yep.
And that's like if you came to me and you said, "Hey, I'm a veteran, I have some surgery, a history of surgery." And I'm like, "Great, we're going to get you in an ice bath at 32 degrees and you're going to stand there for 5 minutes. And if you don't do it, you're a failure." I'm like, that actually means that I am now actually, it's my agenda, not yours. So that's
Correct.
actually, there's like a, literally, there's like a list of red flags for coaches. And that's one of them because it's like, if the coach is more concerned with getting you to catharsis, their goal, then they're not actually, it's not about you anymore. It's about them. And
Yeah.
that's so unhelpful.
Dude, one of my first clients, um, I we were going through some stuff and I was like, all right, this is what I would love to see you try. I think this can help you. And next week we talk and I'm like, all right, how'd it go? And she's like, I didn't do it. I'm like, Okay, like, did you get nervous? Like, what happened?" She goes, I don't want to. I don't agree with it." And she was so nervous. And I was quiet for a second and I was like, "Holy shit, I'm so fucking proud of you." And she like, "What? Wait, what?" Because what I wanted her to do was set a boundary with somebody in her life. But instead of doing that, she set a boundary with me. So, I mean, the goal was accomplished, like I'm gonna like celebrate the win instead of like the little knock to my ego. For me, like if anyone's gonna put me down, it's gonna be me because I'm fucking good at it. Nobody is as good at shitting on me as I am.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm not gonna play T-ball with somebody that's gonna like a your mama joke when I'm like, dude, my brother said I look like a shriveled up turtle when I shave my brain. Like, and that's all I fucking see, dude. Like fucking Caillou that turned to meth. Like it's just horrible. Um, so I'm gonna leave that to the pros. Like nobody else can touch me, So I'm gonna celebrate that win, and it was so meaningful to her. And there's so much like coaching done through like this ego of I am the expert. Like, first off, dude, no, you're not. Like you learn from somebody else, who learned from somebody else, who learned from somebody like it's just the way it goes. Um, and it's your life. We're all different. Like when I first started this, I worked with a dude. I still have a lot of respect for him. Though I don't agree with him, but like he's a Broadway actor and he teaches people how to be authentic. So I realized like I don't know how to be authentic on videos or anything like that. I could not do this. So I told him, I was like, what I tell people is what I have to give you is worthless. It's absolutely meaningless. It's the meaning and the intention that you put behind the information. That's what'll make it either priceless or prove to you that, yeah, it is meaningless for you.
Yeah.
And either way, it's data.
Exactly. That, oh, Keith, we vibe.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because like that's so true because it's this thing about, it's like, right, we go to coaches because of the inherent power dynamic. And I think that sometimes we get scared to speak to that because it's like, you I'm coming to you because it sounds like you have information or data points that would be super helpful to me. And then I think, and then we, if we don't talk about the power dynamic and we don't get very clear on what I'm here to help you with, how I'm going to help you, then there's no back and forth. Then that's when it can start to become super unhelpful, right? Because if I have this expectation that we're on the same team and are in alignment for the same goals, but then we didn't actually get an agreement, and then our goals are actually parallel, not aligned, which again, like close, right? But if I have an agenda that I actually wasn't, you weren't on board with, then that's, it's not gonna work. Right. And I love what you said too about, I'm kind of like putting it in my own words, but it sounds like you really honored this client's no. And I wonder how many times in her life her no's were not honored. Like how many times, because I have a guess of understanding the nervous system of if she got activated, like, right, that's anxiety. It's just technically some activation in the body, some sympathetic charge to help her have energy to get away from the bad thing, the danger. Then it probably means that she has data points of danger for speaking her mind.
Yep.
So the fact that, like, it shouldn't matter if I say, if I scream no or if I whisper no. Like, if that's not honored, then I'm going to have an internalized data point of, well, it doesn't matter what I say because I'm never going to be listened to and I'll never be safe. And I just have to deal with it. And then we start to notice that in people's body language.
Yep.
So you'll be collapsed. Also, okay, Keith, this one blew my mind with this attachment practitioner training. Did you know that your physical shape of your body is basically determined in the first 18 months of life because your boundary style is also developed? Because it
18
presents itself
months.
in a physical form. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
So when we hear, I think it's, oh my God, what's his first name? But the last name is Keelman, Keelman, I think. He is a guy that's been writing about basically body language or body development and how it directly will show up in people's personality. Because think about it. So let's say that I'm a person who, because you've heard of fight, flight, freeze, and then there's fawn. So there's four of them.
Yep.
But so if you notice that someone's body posture, if your client's body posture is chronically like this, so think about it. What is the most important part of the body? It's your vital organs, right?
Right.
So what is this saying? What am I doing? I'm
Protecting them.
unconsciously collapsed posture, which is protecting the internal organs. If you notice that your clients are chronically like this, their bodies are probably unconsciously in a little bit more of a collapsed or protective state because they don't feel safe.
Yep.
And then simply telling them, well, open up. That's what people used to do to me in the coaching sphere because they'd be trying to evoke something from me based on their agenda, not what I needed. And so they'd be like, all right, you just need to, or I had really bad social anxiety. I had one coach tell me, because like they were noticing that I was doing this with my hands when I talked about social anxiety. They're like, well, I want you to go find a busy place and go walk out there with your hands like this. It fucked me up because I was betraying my body's intelligent response to trying to protect myself instead of asking, my body wants to slow down. It moves at the pace of Earth. So, okay. So even anything, sometimes what I'll do with clients is, okay, are you feeling, I can see, I'm noticing that there's something happening right now in your body. Can you tell me what's happening? Like, well, I'm feeling really foggy right now. I'm having a hard time thinking. And I'm like, okay, can you notice your body posture? And they're like, oh, what? And they're like, and I'm like, don't change it. Right. And then I'm like, actually, I want you to curl into it more, just
Yes,
a little
dude.
bit. And then what happens is that it's like you're hungry. And instead of being like, you shouldn't be hungry, it's like, no, feed it. It's hungry. And so we feed it a little bit. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm like, okay, cool. So how are your thoughts now? Well, I feel like, okay, yeah, I feel like I can talk now again.
Dude, we've learned that we don't make money resting. You know,
Maybe.
right. Or
Sorry.
at least other people don't make money from us while we're resting. What
Yes, sorry.
we were hunter gatherers for 90%, if not 99% of human existence. And on average, they'll work about 4 hours a day,
Yeah.
so they're hunting and gathering 4 hours a day. So the other, geez, 20 hours is socialization, maintenance of their weapons, their tools, whatever, and then resting.
Yep.
And that's when you start to see, like, places like Göbekli Tepe, where like one of the first places in Turkey where hunter gatherers would come together in this ceremonial place. And I believe they're finding out it was like a burial, and it's aligned with like stars, so they're worship or not worshiping, but monitoring the stars, and all this stuff. And we need to get back to the roots, like you said, like not just like pouring more water in until the jar clears off. Like, no, we need to pour water in until the bottom falls out, and we go back hundreds of thousands of years back through like the shamanic traditions to where we evolved to be,
Yeah.
to be moving but also resting at the same time, instead of stressed out in this psychological state of fear while we're sitting in a cubicle, doing the same repetitive motions over and over and again, because we have to be kept in that state of fear, that to, like you said, like, you're running, you're the fight or flight, we're fleeing, because when you're doing that, you're not thinking. When this pain, I used to think until Tuesday that I was kinda tough, until because I've never felt anything like that in my life. I I knew I was, like, gonna have a stroke. My blood pressure, when they took the blood pressure, was so high. Like, dude, they gave me, like, 50 milligrams of fentanyl just to get me off the couch.
Yeah.
I was so locked up. I couldn't think, so if you asked me my birth date, I was like, I could get it out, but it took me like 5 minutes. My
Yep.
wife had to like tell him and everything. So when you're in that state, you can't think. And when we can't think, we can't see that everything that's being done is to be like like you were saying, like to create these other divisions, because an us versus them mentality is going to help divide us even more. And
Yep.
our us's have become so small, and we're so distrustful of everybody, even into the family unit. It's crazy. And there's two things that ensured our survival. One was negativity. That's why we
Yeah.
have negativity bias built in, because we weren't looking for the predators. You're dead.
Yep.
The other one was cooperation.
Mhm.
And that's what all of this like speaks to, cooperating. Yeah, I love Confucius, dude. When I went to see Jarrett, and we did the DMT ceremony,
Mhm.
I at one point, like, my eyes opened, and he told me afterwards, like, he said, normally I would have you like close your eyes, but it was like you were looking at the world for the first time, like a brand new baby. It was like, he said, so I would just let you ride with it. And I looked over at him, and he like morphed into Confucius, like right in front of me. Like his mustache, like, just went down to the floor. His eyes narrowed out. His hair just went really long. And I love Confucius. Like, when he talks about concentric circles, like balancing yourself. And once you have that down, then you can balance your family. And then from there, you can balance your community, and ever outward. And it's about like communicating with ourselves, understanding that body language, and then we can start communicating with the people around us. So even when someone's acting like an asshole, we can get into that paradox of understanding why they are, not letting them get away with it, not letting them, not saying it's okay, which a lot of people have so many, like, problems with. Like, if someone's freaking out, be like, dude, whatever. I mean, they're miserable. They're getting their punishment. I'm not going to take that on. Like, oh, you let people walk all over you. No, I'm my energy is too precious to me to waste it on
And
something.
there's a difference between getting in the fight and not getting in the fight. Like I don't know of a more eloquent way to say that, but like if someone like, man, you are just spitting so many nuggets of gold right now that I'm like, which one do I want to speak to?
Yeah,
So
dude. Yeah.
there's a there's a psychological concept. I think this was developed in the 70s called the drama triangle.
Hmm.
And My, oh, wow. Are you okay? All
Oh,
right.
poor baby.
My dog just fell off the chair. All right. You okay, little one? All right. You're fine.
See,
Little,
dude, that was perfect. That's the same thing you would do if it was a baby.
yeah. All right. Pause. Check. We good. Okay.
Yeah.
That happens. But yeah, so the drama triangle, my mentors like adapted it slightly and have gone really deep with it. They call it the oppression trap triangle,
Hmm.
because that's what it does. This triangle oppresses us and it keeps us stuck. It traps us. So what it is that it has three archetypes. It has the victim, the villain, and the victor or the hero. Sometimes I say hero because it's just easier to hear. And what happens is that we're all in this triangle at some point in our life, probably forever. And I say this because when I learned about this, I kind of weaponized it against myself and my loved ones and strangers. So I like to first of all preface it by saying this is not a tool to be used against each other or against ourselves. It is simply an awareness tool, because throughout all of our lives, probably forever, we will dance in and out of it. Even if you're the most healed, enlightened person, you're most likely still going to be like kind of sometimes jumping into it and sometimes jumping out. So what it is that the victim is the linchpin of it all, basically. But let's say that if you can probably think of any scenario in your life where there was anyone who had a conflict or drama. I mean, it literally could, let's even just say something super easy. We're just driving on the road and someone cuts me off. And I like to say, try the archetypes out like costumes, like a sock. You're not married to it. It's not permanent. It's just like a hat you're going to try on and try on the next. Like being curious, how could I have been all of these roles and how could they have been in the role? So I'm driving, someone cuts me off. Well, I'm now the victim and that is the villain, right? They just caused hurt, harm, pain, deficit to me. And so then I become my own hero. Well, you know what? I'm going to back off because I don't want no part of that, right? Or I could go and be my own villain. Well, screw them. I'm going to zoom up next to them and tailgate them. All right. And then someone else maybe is watching it from another car being like, wow, that's that poor person. And look at that terrible person. I'm going to call the cops on them. So now they're acting in the hero space, right? But we just started a spiral. And now we're caught in the tornado. Hey, sweetie, I love you. And I know she loves this bone, but it's so loud.
Oh.
It's so loud, baby. Can you go find another spot? Um, and so what happens is that we get stuck in this trap of oppression, basically. And so, and this has been really hard because even for me, what I've noticed is it is a trap because I have a friend right now who's going through some really tough times and they're struggling. And part of me wants to come in and rescue them, which is me being in the hero, which is me being like, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you a place to live. I'm going to give you rides anywhere you need to, because they found themselves unhoused, no job, no car. And so, and they're in a pretty dire situation right now. So they're in crisis. And I'm like, one of my patterns is to want to help. I can save you. I can save you. But then I'm like, wow, I'm actually playing out the hero role. I'm making their situation the villain and she's the victim. And I'm like, okay, so not helpful. So I'm going to step out of the triangle. And how we do this is through empowerment, clarification, and boundaries. Because usually when someone's being in the hero space, they're doing it at the expense of themselves or others.
Yep.
So, like, if I step in and save this person by giving them all of the things that they need, I'm actually robbing them of their own experience of creating healthy things, learning the lesson they need to learn. Because if I just save this person, maybe they needed to go through that in order to not repeat the pattern of how they got into that victim space. And again, it's so hard sometimes for me because I'm like, I even feel hesitant to say victim space because it's such a freaking people are so on those words right now. And again, like I said, we weaponize them against ourselves and each other. But
Yep.
I mean it from like, hey, I'm going to stop, slow down, and see what I'm actually available for. And I'm like, I can help you in these ways. And I have been helping them, but consciously and with empowerment and boundaries. So they're actually now helping themselves and they're growing. And I am not being leveraged into their drama. So
Right.
that kind of comes to that thing of like when you're saying, right? Like, I'm not getting in the pool with her. Now I can be like, hey, there's a bunch of floaties. Do you want me to throw you one? Um, but even there's even things where I've noticed in my own life in a very subtle way of how we all generally play out the drama triangle, like I said, but like sometimes, even with my partner, hey, I tell them, hey, can you do the dishes? And then they're like, start having this whole thing about doing the dishes. I'm like, you know what? Fine, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. So I end up saving myself from the argument by martyring myself.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, I am somehow in that situation, all three at once, real quick.
Yep.
Right. And I'm like, ooh, all I have to do is notice the pattern. I don't even have to change it immediately.
Yes, dude.
That's it. Right. And I love what you said too about like, you're like, I thought I was like a strong man until I realized that like what this pain did, right? This is actually one of my biggest, again, I've stopped saying hill I'm gonna die on because I don't want to program that I'm gonna die on a hill. I'll plant my flag in it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I'm like, this idea of mind over matter is so adorable because that's another black and white thinking we've been taught as like it's kind of like a subversive way of controlling us actually, because 5% of your brain is conscious. 95% is not.
Yep.
And also, the most hilarious thing, too, when people talk about the nervous system is I'm like, yo, did you know your nervous system is actually your brain and your brainstem on top of the other parts? So people are like, I have my conscious thought and then I have my nervous system. I'm like, bro, those are literally like the same thing, sort of. We're just making verbal distinctions. But that's that thing where it's like, your body has biological mechanisms built into it where that if a situation reaches a certain point, it has emergency brakes and levers. And you got to have that real life experience of noticing that actually we're in less control of ourselves and our bodies than maybe we'd like to admit, because not being in control feels scary. And doing coaching, mindset work, and awareness work, we can make the 5% more potent. My favorite analogy that I came up with is that picture that you are actually a semi truck. 95% of that truck is a truck, and you got 5% of yourself in the driver's seat. Now, do you want to be that unconscious 5% with that much momentum behind you, or do you want to make that 5% really potent? That's why we do coaching. That's why we do this internal work. So we can work with the truck.
Yes. Dude, that is I love that analogy because it's such a beautiful way to look at it. Like having to do this by myself, because for me, like a lot, like happiness and joy, contentment in life, it's all gate kept behind, abundance. But that's like one of my things. Like, dude, the last thing I want is abundance and money. Like I would love it, dude. I would love to be like a millionaire, and because so much of the most beautiful places on earth now you have to have a certain level of income in order to enjoy.
Yeah.
So I can travel to all these places and experience all this stuff, but dude, I just want contentment in my life. Like I've not had peace for so long, that that's all I want. And if that means like it's in a shed on a side of a mountain where I'm completely alone except with animals or whatever, like then dude, that's all I want, and I'll be a million times happier than the richest person in the world. Like I grew up in a very strict Baptist church for like the longest time. I think it took like 40 years to finally wake up and sort of escape out of that. But they always talked about King Solomon, the wisest and richest man according to the Bible that ever lived. And then in one of the books that he wrote, man, wow, this actually makes me happy. I'm starting to forget some of this stuff. I think Lamentations, but he talks about everything is vanity. That he with his money looked for power and material wealth and women, all this stuff, and when it came down to everything, it was just meaningless. And so it's that internal look to understand what's driving that ship. Is it just the wind that comes that just takes the sail and blows us whichever direction, and then we're a slave to the circumstances of life? But it comes down to accepting that chaos is. So we're gonna have experiences that fucking suck, and it's perfectly normal and probably good for us to say it sucks. Like, I mean, dude, the other day, like, I was saying things that, like, 10 years ago, I would never come out of my mouth. Like, I'm scared. When the doctor came in, the doctor's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Doc, I'm scared right now because I don't know how much control I have left." My brain just, I thought was gonna die. You know what I mean? Like, not to that level, but I thought something was seriously wrong and that my life was changing in that moment forever. That's scary.
Yeah.
Courage is meeting it where it's at, accepting it, and saying, "Okay, I gotta ride this out." But for the longest time, I thought that if I could get to that point where I'm thinking, "I gotta ride this out," magically the pain would go away, whether it's emotional or physical. The anxiety would go away, the depression would go away. It doesn't, but I saw there's a girl I follow on TikTok. She's really cool. I think it's her name is Jess the Alchemist, like her little name on there. But she was in the Navy and she worked I think with ships and stuff at somewhere with the engines because she knew like about just like energy, like the engineering of it. And she was like, all energy is positive. So when we talk about our negative emotions, like we're saying this energy of mine is negative and I shouldn't have it. So we live, like you said, consciously, 5% of our brain's conscious. So in the entire spectrum of consciousness, we live in this very small little thing, just like the visual light spectrum. There's more that we don't see than we actually see. And we live in this little small area of consciousness, and then we want to amputate half of that and say, okay, these are bad. Like, no, dude, some of my best days now are the days I get depressed, because I find joy in the sadness. You know, I'll struggle with it for a time and then I'll be like, "Oh, okay, wait. I have no motivation. I don't want to do anything. I'm not happy. I'm sad for what appears to be no reason at all. I'm depressed." Like, "All right, cool." Because now I'm feeling something comfortable, something that I know. You know
Mm.
what I mean? And then I know the things that I could do like to soothe that a little bit. And now because I'm not living in those moments like 24/7 where that's all I'm doing is trying to soothe and hide from my emotions, it becomes nice. Like, dude, I'm gonna sit down and watch like 10 episodes of The Office or something like that, just enjoy myself for a little bit. And it
Yeah.
becomes a beautiful moment where I can find gratitude in what I used to prefer as this like negative emotion, almost like it's a ghoul, like a ghost I gotta hide from. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
feel that.
I love that. I thank you for sharing that because that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. And yeah, I feel very similar on the path of I asked for help. I went to doctors and they did not help me. And so I've had to find these answers on my own as well and seek them out and figure it out for me. Um, and now I'm only, I'm a few steps ahead. I don't have everything figured out, but I can help the people who are here, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not over here, but like, right. But there's this thing that through a lot of my learning and teaching and learning about the nervous system was literally the key that unlocked everything for me because I've got to see and find data to prove that we are not, I am not, you are not bad, wrong, or broken. We're not. You don't need fixing. There's nothing wrong with us. It's just that maybe some mechanisms have gotten a little overengaged or underengaged, or there is a backlog. There is a backlog of things that have been suppressed, repressed, or depressed. And so a lot of the work I actually do with clients is teaching them about what anxiety and depression actually are. So we talked about the nervous system earlier, about how it does these waves, right? And then we talked about them ping ponging. So anxiety is really just a super activation of that mobilization energy, because it's trying to give you adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, all of these things in order to give you energy, gift you energy to solve a current problem or a perceived problem, right? Because we know that it thinks they're the same. But when we keep repressing it, it's like an energy bomb that's building up. And when that bomb explodes, it feels like an anxiety, a panic attack,
Yeah.
right? But all that means is that we get to, if we can meet that energy activation, we can let it move through and out. But if we keep not facing it, trying to keep running away from it, it's going to backlog. And same thing. Another thing that I say to my clients too is like, anytime you have an emotion or a sensation, physical sensation or emotion, think of it like you got a text message on your phone. Oh, which app did that just come from? Oh, was that my Facebook Messenger? Was that an Instagram? Was that a Marco Polo? Was that some random app I didn't even know I had on my phone? Get curious. Where did it come from? And just be like, okay, heard, right? Because then depression is just a backlog of a lot of those emotions or feelings or sensations that we depressed. And the body said, hey, this is too much. So I'm going to go into a collapse response, because the driver is either overexerting me and I don't have any energy left. So I have an empty gas tank. So the car is going to stall, or I was revving my engine so much and we weren't going anywhere because you also had the emergency brake on and things were out of alignment. And so then the car goes,
Yep.
right? So depression, or these things where we're not able to think, not able to move, we're lethargic. I don't even believe in the word lazy. I think that term is just a shame term.
Yep.
If you're feeling lazy, maybe it's our body and our brain screaming for rest. How hard have you been pushing yourself? How much coffee do you drink? Are your adrenals so burnt out that you're literally been running your car on empty? And
Yep.
now all of a sudden, you're like, I don't understand. My check engine light has only been on for 6 months,
Yep.
and I kind of say that jokingly because like I've been, I don't do that to my car. I actually treat my car better than I treat myself.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Right, but that's the thing. So it's like when we have to, sometimes though we can only hear the loud voices, the
Yep.
panic attack, or the 4 days of depression. And what if we started to change our strategy? Because there's nothing wrong with us, it's just a strategy that's not working. So how do we start to incorporate more rest, more episodes of The Office, more time specifically to nourish and go to the gas station?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, you're going to be like, wow, my car's running so great. I never thought I'd leave the state in this car. Oh my God, what if I actually go drive to the Grand Canyon? What if there's actually more joy? And okay, and then you said the thing about abundance. I have had this thing that's been driving me crazy for the last 10 years. There is no such thing as a lack of abundance. You just might not have abundance in the things you want. You're
Yes.
never actually lacking it.
Yes.
Because people say, like, I'm lacking money. I'm like, listen, currently me, I am lacking a positive bank account. I am not lacking in the numbers of debt. I'm actually have a ton of financial abundance, just in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
That's one of my, again, my mentors talk about this. There's no such thing as a lack of confidence. You always have confidence, just confidence that you can or confidence that you can't. It's just a sliding scale of can't or can. It's not a lack of confidence.
Yep.
And then I heard that and I was like, that's my abundance, like thing.
Yeah. Dude, the first work I ever did, my cause my for me, like my rage was just out of control.
Mhm.
Me and Sandy ended up getting divorced. And then 3 years later we got remarried and we're about to hit 30 years together total this year. Yeah. She's freaking amazing. But everything came out in this rage. And I was constantly told, you have anger management issues. You got to go to anger management, learn how to manage that anger. And I always hated that, but I went. And sure enough, whether either because I went in with my bias, that this was all bullshit and it wasn't going to work, or if it just was bullshit and it didn't work for me. Um, like nothing changed, it could be because it was like, and this was the thing for me with therapy is I would go in, we would do like a little worksheet there. I would have to like fill out a couple of things throughout the week, but that would take 3 minutes, and then I would put it away and then take it out when I went back to my next session. So I worked on, like you were talking about earlier, the integration. I worked on the integrating the things I was supposed to be learning for about 3 minutes. And then the rest of the hours within the week, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just again running on autopilot. So my anger was in control. And I finally realized like I don't have an anger problem. I have a mastery of anger because I practiced it every opportunity that I get.
Oh, that's
And
gold.
there's never, I mean, you talk about abundance, there's never a lack of abundance of reasons to be pissed. I could, in fact, one time I lost my shit because somebody, and to this day, I still don't know who it is, but somebody printed off sheet music or got it from school or something and put it on the counter. And both my girls say it wasn't theirs, and Sandy says it wasn't hers. So I'm like, why is there Little Mermaid sheet music? And I started going off about elves breaking into the house and firing up the computer and printing off random Disney songs and then just leaving around the house and how like all this shit. But when saying it now, it can be like, oh, that's funny, but whatever. But like, I mean, when you're like an 8-year-old kid and you're experiencing a level of anger that is scary over something so small, like that's gonna change the way you look at the world. Luckily, like I said now, like the relationship with my kids is amazing, but we've had to talk through that, and I've had to admit things that even they like some of them they're like, I don't remember that, but I still had to admit things that I didn't want to. That was a huge kick in like my ego nuts, dude. Like it was horrible. But um, so I just went off on my little like rabbit trail, and then my brain's
No,
like,
I think
"Oh, I can remember."
but that's so beautiful because first of all, that brings up a few things when I like put my practitioner hat on is there's something that I have learned. So like for me, I have a disorganized attachment style. So basically like I will go from like very wibbly wobbly and not feeling safe in connection with people. And going back to the conversation of like I have been terrified to have kids because I was so scared about having an explosion in front of them or getting depressed in front of them or all of these things, right? We talk about in relationships, you have ruptures and repairs. And I was so scared of the conflict, which is the rupture, because it was never modeled to me in pretty much my entire life. I was only modeled fights, explosions, ruptures. It was never modeled repairs. So to me, anytime that there was any type of conflict, it felt like death. It felt like everything's over. It felt like it's the end. So then that showed up in my adult relationships of having one little fight with my partner. Well, that's it. Well, we're just going to break up. Why don't you go find a new girlfriend? And I was like, wow, okay. And then again, I've been going down this path of learning about it. And I'm like, well, shit. what they actually talk about in a secure attachment base or secure relationships, it's not that there's not fights. It's not that there's not conflict. In fact, people with secure attachment know that fights, ruptures, and conflicts are inevitable. But that doesn't destroy it, because what's actually important is to actually, when we hide fighting from kids, that's also sometimes equally as harmful. It's really just about showing the kids the repair and the coming back together. So, like, the fact that even you have done this work as a father, as a man, as all of these, identities, to me gives me hope for humanity, because it's showing that there is someone who is out there doing the work and coming to and being, that is the authentic Keith, is that person who's willing to show up and show the repair, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's difficult, even when it doesn't feel good, because that's the embodiment, that's the modeling, not the virtual signaling, not the just talking about. And I think that that's really important, because, like, okay, so Keith, this morning I'm going to tell you something. My partner has been using my car this week, and it's the nicest car we own out of all three of our vehicles. He has a habit of not locking my car. So someone broke into my car last night.
Oh no.
It's okay, because I like slowed down, and I was like, they didn't break anything in the car. They just went through my console. They stole some stuff out of my car. I had some money in the car, not a ton. And I was like, wow, this person. And there was another vehicle that had a bunch of stuff in it, but it was locked, so they didn't touch it. And I was like, wow, I really wonder if this, how much of a hard time this person was going through, that they probably were going through the whole neighborhood just trying to find an unlocked car. So also it goes to speak of that they weren't trying to do violence, right? They weren't breaking something, but they were just probably in a lot of need, and they were trying to really quietly meet their needs in some sort of way, right? So I noticed myself having some compassion, even though I'm also frustrated and upset and hurt. But I noticed that I had a lot more compassion for this stranger who I could try to imagine a story of context for. And then I was frustrated at my partner, right? This was me being in the triangle, right? I'm the victim, like, but I'm also going to be the hero, because I'm going to save myself by making understanding about this person, right? And then my partner's the villain. He left the car unlocked, and he always does this, blah, 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 right? So I noticed my pattern. And then he had to go off to work. He took the car and he called me up, and we started talking about it. And I noticed that I was repressing my anger, and I was trying to be nice to him because I didn't want him to feel bad. Again, being the hero, trying to rescue him from feeling uncomfortable about an action he had, that he did or did not take. And then I was like, no, what do I preach? I mean, this was more unconscious. This is now me more like consciously processing this in this moment. But I'd been told anger is bad. Anger is wrong. Anger is terrible. Anger is not wrong. Again, it's energy.
Yep.
It's a protector. Anger is sacred, because it shows me anger is a protector emotion. It from my current lens, I have yet to find a place where this is not true. But anger is always sitting on top of sadness, like hurt, harm, pain, always, because it's protecting. It's a warrior over the wound.
Yep.
So I felt hurt that my stuff got stolen. And so I was angry about it. So anger is actually incredibly useful, helpful, and sacred, because it shows us the roots of our wounds. And now there can be healthy and unhealthy expressions of anger. But because of the work that my partner and I have done, I'm really proud of myself, because when on the phone today, I expressed my anger. I said that I'm really upset about this, that, and the other thing, and that there's a pattern here and all this stuff. And I expressed it to him. But the work that him and I have done, at the end of it, he said, thank you for feeling safe enough to finally express your anger to me. And I was like, shit, you're welcome. And then also, literally in the past, this goes to show me today in this moment of how far I've come on my own healing journey. because that right there would have 4 or 5 years ago spiraled me into a depression, or I would not have been able to show up today. I would have been curled up in a ball on my bed and not able to have shown up. I definitely wouldn't have come on this podcast. I either would have ghosted you or I would have canceled. Now,
Mm,
I did cancel an 8:30 a.m. meeting today because I was in the waves of the emotions, and I said, "Hey, I know we have a call at 8:30. I'm having my car got broken into and I need to deal with it." And what did I need to deal with? Letting my body go through what it needed to go through. And she did, and I honored myself and my body, because this part of me needed to go through at a process just as much as this did, and I needed them to get in coherence.
yep.
And we did. And that was so fucking cool. Also, sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear. I usually swear like a sailor, but
Oh
so I
yeah,
just want to say,
100%,
fuck
dude.
yeah.
Yes, dude. Yeah. Dude, that is, I gotta ask you a question. So in the
Yeah.
moment where he thanked you
Yep.
for feeling safe enough to express your anger, what did you feel for him in that moment?
It's interesting because if I'm going to be completely honest, at first, it was like a micro, like a little micro thing, contempt, fuck you. And then I was like, yeah, yeah, you're right. Yup, this is everything we've. So it was like this like piece of paper thin, like still wanting to make him evil. And then I was like, you're right. Yeah, okay. I love you too. I love you. I love you. I'm almost even fighting with you because can I'm upset about the rupture of our connection.
Yes.
So that's what I'm mad about, because I wanted to stay connected. And so the bloop, that's what I'm mad about. But I wanted it to not have ruptured, but then I let it stay ruptured because I can't sit with the feeling of the anger long enough to let it connect. And that was, you actually spoke to that a while ago about when you were talking about the anxiety. So they've shown that an emotion generally, the majority of emotions will dissipate in 30 to 90 seconds if you sit with them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, shit, I actually let myself feel the healthy expression of the anger. And what happened? It freaking dissipated. And now I'm back in connection. It actually went away instead of now me harboring anger about my car for the next 6 months or a year or rest of our relationship.
And I think like when you said that you had that little blip, that momentary kind of contempt, like that's where I find myself, that's where I'll fail at that point. Because that's the point where we make, I think, a decision. Do I sit in the ego and do I sit in the victimization and in the, make my anger righteous, where I can really like make the other person pay, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what has to
All right.
happen,
No, peak.
and then just that acceptance of, all right, and then I love you too. Like that is the most important like nanosecond that goes on in our lives. And when we're driven by the winds of like emotional change, we can't sit through that little pop. That little pop will just take us, almost like
Well,
a riptide.
it's
Boom.
honestly, like, to be real about it, it's because it's kind of a drug.
Yes.
It is adrenaline can feel really good. Like there's been times when I've been healing my anger, and by healing it, not to make it disappear, but to get in right relationship with it, right? Big difference. I noticed that sometimes I was staying angry because it felt good. Because I was like, ooh, I can feel the adrenaline. I can feel the righteousness. I can, ooh, right? Like, and I'm like, wow, I'm a little drug addict to my own emotions.
Yeah, dude.
How funny.
Yeah.
Okay, hey, baby girl. So that's your favorite ball, but it's the only thing in this house that has a squeaker. That's why we're having an issue, baby girl. Literally, I refused to buy
Oh,
any toys with squeakers, but I had this one before we got her, and now she's like, if you're not paying
oh,
attention to me, I'm gonna come and squeak it in your face.
yeah, yeah. That's so awesome. Poor
Okay,
Pop. I'm
it's also
sorry.
it's a little Jack Skellington ball.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, okay, all done, baby.
Yeah, dude, that is so it's magical, dude. Like we think that giving up, even for me, like with my anger, like I felt giving that up was going to create weakness. And the pendulum swung too far the other way, where I became more of a people pleaser, because I'm like, okay, it's bad now to express my anger, so I had to let everything kind of right itself and the pendulum to come back. And then I learned about assertiveness, like where I've never even thought of that word before, and then I'm like, this is what that is, like I can be true to myself and not be a dick, like I didn't know that was possible, That
Yeah.
that was the thing, like with my anger, like when I realized I didn't have an anger problem, I had a mastery of it. And I that's all I was feeling because it's all I practiced, but what I didn't practice was joy, contentment, peace. And then the biggest thing was I realized I can't practice peace when I'm at peace.
Mm.
I realized like I got to go out and get pissed off so I can now practice peace. And
That's like, so we talk about that in the ice bath. You don't ice bath to get good at ice bathing. You ice
yes,
bath to get good at life and to being in the discomfort. And then how are you with yourself in the discomfort?
and yes, and yeah, like what you were saying before, like if you can go 20 minutes in an ice bath, like you're not good at doing an ice bath. You're good at disassociating, like, and that's the thing, like the nuance to the intention. When you talk about being nervous of having kids, if I can give an observation, if
Go
that's
for it.
this is why I think that your kids are going to be incredibly lucky. I started doing this thing I call Scooby doing it. At the end of it, and like all Scooby Doo, like they pull the mask off. Like, let's see who's really behind this, right? When I was people pleasing, and I was depressing my own emotions, my own boundaries, my own anger, so that I wouldn't upset somebody that's upset with me because they're an idiot. Like I didn't do anything, but they're blaming whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, And I would be like, "Okay, all right, yeah, you're right. You do have the right to talk to me that way, and let me change how I'm being, to suit your emotional needs. Since you can't control your emotions, let me change myself so that you can." If I pull the mask off, who am I really doing that for? I'm not doing that for them. I'm doing that for me because I don't like the confrontation. So I'm going to soothe that. I'm going to protect myself from that by changing myself.
Yes.
But when you ask the question, am I gonna, pop off? Am I gonna, have this angry thing? When you always went back to what is that gonna do for the child? What is that gonna do to the child? What are they gonna learn? Like how is it gonna affect them? So if you go through that whole Scooby-Doo thing, where does your intention lie? Your intention lies on the protection and the love for the baby.
Mm.
It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And that's what you're afraid of.
Yeah, and then right, and it's like, and I love how you actually also too just spoke so eloquently to a lived experience of also the fawn response, because that is people pleasing basically. I mean, there's some nuances and some gray areas there, but like in if I'm generalizing, right? And you also again spoke to how that people pleaser response plays out in in that OTT and the drama triangle, right? Because I'm actually saving myself from a certain experience by people pleasing, by being like, well, you know what? It's actually going to be easier to just deal with letting them speak to me this way. And then I'm going to get out of this quicker, faster, and with less bumps and bruises. And then I can just get myself, I can just deal
Yeah.
with it, right? I can save myself from having to be in the conflict of anger. I can save myself from all of these things. And it's, again, how freaking intelligent. Like, how amazing that we do that. Like,
Yeah.
and is that strategy currently helpful? Whoop, they're a little, she's starting to get mad. So she's starting to throw her little booty around.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Pop.
Nah, she's okay. He's okay. We're going to go do stuff later. Um,
Um,
but yeah, so that's just really, I think that was a really potent example too. And, yeah. And I think also the last thing I'll say is that I also think that for me, I also found out, only like in the last year in 2024 that I actually didn't even understand what a boundary was. The difference between a request and a boundary. A boundary has to do with me and me taking action with myself. It has nothing to do with the other person. And I was like, that really blew my mind because I didn't realize that I wasn't clear on that. I didn't realize that get away from me is a request. If you come closer to me, I am going to remove myself from the situation or I will push you away. That's technically a boundary because
Mhm.
there's an action associated, my action associated with it. And I was like, that blew my mind.
Yeah, I love that, dude. I haven't heard that before, but yeah.
Yep. That was and I learned that actually from two different like schools that I went to, of trainings that I'm in, and they both said that in different, verbiage. And I was like, crap, that's real. I haven't been setting boundaries in my life like at
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
I'm like, stop leaving the remote on the counter. And I'm like, oh, that's not a boundary. That's a request. I'm like, crap. How
Just
many
think
times
like,
have I done that with people? And then I'm like, why are you not listening? And I'm like, because there wasn't actually a boundary set. I was just making requests. Crap.
dude, I am gonna have so much fun the rest of this day because I really think I'm just gonna spend the rest of the day annoying the shit out of Sandy by telling her all her requests and why they need to be boundaries.
Ma'am, or did you do are you needing something?
She does not like me at all. Give me the
No,
side.
it's because I took this and it's over here now. So it's like, excuse me, I'd like to squeak that.
Well, dude, I just looked at the time. Like we've been going for like 2 hours, man.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, Keith, maybe we can link back up and do this again because you have just been an absolute joy to talk with.
Oh my God, dude. Yeah, 100%. I want to like, what are you doing tomorrow? No, I'm just, yeah, dude. I got some. I would like once we stop recording too. I want to like run a couple things by you real
Okay.
fast just to see what you think. But yeah,
Sure.
this has been so freaking amazing. And like, this is what I'm doing the next little bit is just like going through videos since I can't really do anything. I'm like but Sandy made me a nest. Like, I feel like fucking Big Bird, dude. I am so like, my bed is like all up. I'm surrounded by pillows. I am so because I can't lay down flat or anything.
Yep.
So I am so comfortable though. So
Yeah.
I always tell Sandy, I'm like, all right, I'm going in the nest for a while.
I love it.
So yeah, I'm just gonna nest up and just like start editing videos and stuff, dude. And yeah,
Perfect.
I
Right.
can't
I
wait to
mean,
get through this.
I'm also a person where I think that telling people everything happens for a reason when they're in the middle of a crisis is one of the worst things you can say to somebody. It's
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
like that's something built for hindsight. Don't ever say that unless they need to be in the hindsight phase. But
yeah.
right, and that's why like a lot of coaches are like, "How is this happening for you, not to
Yes.
you?" And I'm like, oh. But I'm like, and in this moment, right? Because I'm being like, oh my God, Keith, how wonderful this is for you.
Like, yes. How is my size not up your ass happening for you? Oh yeah, yeah. It goes to show like I really believe we've with all the technology and advances, like one of the major downfalls to it is we've stopped being able to think for ourselves. Like we've
Yeah.
outsourced our thinking, you
My God,
know?
we've outsourced everything. We've outsourced our thinking, our health, our autonomy. Like, what happens if the internet goes down? Y'all, oh my God, Keith, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Here in Texas, there was like, it was back in 2021. They called it snowpocalypse happened.
Yes,
It was an
dude.
issue because it did get to temperatures where basically people are kind of mean about it. But if you actually bring logic into the situation, it's that the houses here are not structurally built for the cold. So the issue really is that, like, I'm not kidding you, like it was like 75% of houses had pipes burst. So it was like, and then a water main broke, so there was no water here, like drinkable potable water. So it was legitimately difficult. But the other thing was is that before that really happened, everyone was freaking out because no one knew any of the basic like snow things. And
Yeah.
I'm being from New Hampshire, I was like, are y'all okay? Like, but it was just interesting because people like freaked out over not understanding like these small little strategies or tactics. And I forgot why I even brought that up, but it was kind of wild.
Yeah, dude. I didn't even think that you lived through that. That was crazy.
Yeah, but it was kind of weird to be over here being like, this is just a lack of information and communication. And if we can just all communicate better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We're so afraid to say,
Oh, the autonomy, that's what it was, is that people
yeah,
didn't
yeah, yeah.
have, they don't even know how to like, they'll freak out. And I was like, you could also Google. Like that's actually how people think I know a bunch of things. And I'm like, yeah, because I'd Google it and then check multiple sources. So it's like,
Yes.
but people
Yeah.
don't, they haven't learned and then they outsource someone else to save them. That's where I
Right.
was with that.
Yes, dude. Yes. Yeah. And again, you end with something that like was the beginning of my journey, where you outsource things like to save them. Like that was the realization I had when I started using anthropology to study my own brain as its own culture, to understand everything about it. Like
Love
I came to this
that.
realization that I'm sitting here waiting for an Amazon truck to pull up and drop off a box of peace and contentment and happiness in my life, and it's just not going to happen. I have to go in. What nobody told me though is when you go in, you got to go past all the shadows and the demons and the scary shit, and you have to feel it.
I mean, I keep saying one more thing, right? But
Yeah.
this is not my concept. This is someone else's that I've kind of visually expanded on. But like, if we think of like what we've done is we've walled ourselves off in our home and there's these things banging on the door. And that's our anxiety, our uncomfortability, our anger, all these things that we're like, get away from here, even like shame or feeling contempt or feeling jealousy, right? And you're talking about all of these, like, we got to deal with those shadows, right? But there's a concept of they're banging on the door. Sometimes all we actually need to do is open the door and let them come in and sit on the couch because all they're asking to be is seen and heard. And we don't actually have to deal with them or get rid of them or even do anything with them. Sometimes, literally, the majority of these demons or shadows, they're just being asked to be heard. And if we hear them out for a second and get curious, they'll just go to sleep on the couch. And then that's it. And then maybe eventually they'll wake up and you'll say, hey, friend, is there something else you needed to tell me? But then they're not breaking down your door. You just got to hear your incredibly important information. We don't have to. This is another thing in the coaching culture that drives me crazy. You do not have to kill your ego. You do not need ego death. We need that no part of you needs to be excommunicated or shamed or deleted or murdered. I don't want to murder any part of Keith. Now, I would invite Keith to evolve, to grow. A tree has rings because it didn't separate itself from its smaller self. It grew and it incorporated new layers of itself. It evolved. So I'm here for ego evolution, not killing a part of yourself.
Oh my, that's it. Mic drop right there. Dude, what the fuck is going on today, man? Like one of the first times I did a high dose of psilocybin. I was in the woods and I was just walking, and for some reason I have to talk. Like I have to, and I think it's because I suppress my voice so much that like when I'm completely free of all that, I have to talk. And I was just talking about how everybody's going for ego death, and I don't understand it. Like why would we be born with something that we shouldn't have? Like there's this sort of spiritual vestigial organ, that's just fucking us up, that we don't need to have. Like no, we have to come into alignment with our ego.
I'm not, I am no longer taking appointments for the ego death. I am no longer taking appointments. There is no room in my schedule for talking about saying that I was personally, I wasn't born with any sin. I was actually, I'm born wonderful. And I have my own responsibility, aka ability to respond to the situations that I'm in, and I get to meet myself and grow myself and come back to myself. I think that we're born in a place where we're taught to disintegrate from the self. And my work here on this planet is to reintegrate in order to get in alignment with me and myself. There is no part of me that is wrong, bad, or broken. And I truly believe that. Now there's some strategies that aren't super helpful.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's filtering through the belief systems that we have, that we agree with and we align with, and through the ones that we've adopted because somebody told us to, or it
Oh my
experienced it.
God. That Keith right there. Oh my God. Seriously. That was something that one of my friends said to me like probably 10 years ago. So I was saying we're having some conversation and she's like, Kelly, I'm gonna invite you to something. Whose voice is that? Is
Yes.
like right? They're like, where did that come from? Is that your voice or is that someone else's voice that it has you've heard for so long that you've mistaken that as your own? And I'm like, fuck.
That's so good, dude. All right. This has
Right.
been I'll stop recording now. I'm gonna get it. I'll put it up like on Google
Cool.
Docs or whatever. Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that you can get it too. Yeah, then I got a couple questions for you.
Okay, wait. You stop recording. I'm gonna hit the bathroom super quick and then I'll be right back.
Cool. I'm gonna stay in my nest.